Poker players and gamblers of other hues love to talk about the most significant game, bet, and stakes ever played, and many of the epic tales of gambling bravado have unfolded beneath the storied skylines of Las Vegas. Phill Ivey's poker career and resume have been blessed with some fine moments. 5 WSOP bracelets and a multitude of EPT, WPT final table finishes speak for themselves, really. Poker player Phill Ivey's also a regular player in the big game, which is a scene in Bobby's room for some of the biggest as well as the highest live stakes poker games available, and with tables regularly set at around $4,000 or $8,000 blinds. It was joined by professional poker players who competed regularly, and they featured upswings of more than $2 million plus. Also, the big game's nosebleed stakes made it shocking to most people in the poker circle. But then, only a few years ago, Phill Ivey, along with a select group of the world's greatest ever poker players, known as the Corporation, sat down and played 50 over 100K. Now, what is the sum of 2 players and a game of Limit Texas Hold'em divided by 3 days of extreme heads-up action? Well, the answer is $16.6 million. In the poker world, billionaire and richest man in Dallas, Andy Beal, is famous for having taken on a syndicate of poker pros known as the Corporation in a series of ultra-high stakes heads-up poker games between 2001 and 2006. Then, over the years, Andy Beal applied the probability to the game of poker. The group found new fame by challenging elite poker players in a spirited game of Limit Texas Hold'em. It was called Beal's Conjecture, and it kind of became just that for famed The Corporation, which is basically a team of expert poker players who had aggregated their $10 million, as well as matched it against his $20 million in a number of private sessions. And since early February, the event became a virtual roller coaster ride for poker players and enthusiasts alike. Then, at the mid-month break of the nail-biting 2-week competition, the Corporation had depleted its $10 million bankroll. All the members reportedly dusted themselves off and prepared for Thursday's famous LA Poker Classic event in California. The game was, later on, paused until the 2 teams could coordinate their schedules. On Monday night, the 20th of February in 2006, Andy Beal was back on a flight to Las Vegas and then checked himself into the Wynn Resort on his arrival. He had returned to play the 3rd week of high-stakes Texas Hold'em poker against a new challenger, and the Corporation's longtime team member, who was Phill Ivey. Phill Ivey had a reputation for his aggressive play and unwavering focus at the tables, and at the recent Card Player of the Year awards, Phill Ivey took home 3 top awards: the best no-limit player, the best heads-up player, as well as the most feared player. Phill Ivey still continues to play the highest stakes cash games in the world in addition to the poker tournament circuits. The famous play started out in the late afternoon, and the blinds were set at $30,000 to $60,000, which was a bit lower than the previous $50,000 to $100,000 of the weeks past. Phill Ivey held the lead throughout the day's match. The spectators in the high-limit section of the Wynn Poker Room who witnessed much of the action shared their thoughts with Card Player. Most felt that Phill Ivey had exhibited an aggressive approach, and in typical fashion, he usually sat blank-faced, focused, and with his mouth agape. It is worth mentioning that this was the same expression that had also won Ivey the Fleshies Award for the best poker face, and also during the 2005 World Series of Poker. At any table, Ivey has an intense and intimidating nature, and the one-on-one competition with Beal only seems to magnify this trait. The intense first play ended at around 7 p.m. PST, and it appeared Phill Ivey was up several racks. A member of the Corporation confirmed that the number was $2 million in Phill Ivey and the Corporation's favor. And at the very first thing Wednesday morning, Phill Ivey and Andy Beal were again heads up at the Wynn Felt on table number 3. Blinds remained at $30,000 to $60,000, and again, Phill Ivey seemed to have the advantage over Andy Beal. Then, in only less than 8 hours of heightened competition, poker player Ivey ended the day with another monetary gain of $4.6 million. Phill Ivey and Andy Beal left the poker room table together while conversing amongst themselves. The next day, Beal and Ivey met for a 3rd and final session. At the long end of the table, Ivey was in seat 2 with his back against the wall. Andy Beale sat in seat 6 at an angle so as to face the famous player Ivey, and to Beale's left in seat 7 sat his longtime friend and representative, Craig Singer, and right next to him was Michael Craig, who is the author of the book The Professor, the Banker, and the Suicide King in seat 9. The two players discussed the possibility of raising the stakes while the witnesses remained silent, and it took only moments for Ivey and Beale to come to an agreement, and the blinds would indeed be raised to the original level, around $30,000 to $60,000, increasing the limits to $50,000 to $100,000. Then, at around noon, the poker players took a short break, and Craig Singer told that Andy Beale had developed a reserved curiosity over the media's need to share the details regarding the private high-stakes matches. Back in Texas, Singer had printed out the latest article and placed it on Beale's desk for his reveal. And then suddenly, the break was over, and Singer was due to return to his seat. He informed us Beale was up almost $2 million. He stated as he returned to the game about to resume, "We're doing better today." And from the rail, one could only see Beale repeatedly reaching into his rack for chips. Within a few hands, it appeared Phill Ivey had reserved his deficit and was back to even. The dealer was basically tapped out, and the new one took his place. When the dealer was swapped out, he then shook his head in disbelief while walking from the table. And the already intense face-off had become an action-packed and raised to the river spectacle. Members of the corporation started to arrive and could be seen on the sidelines talking discreetly with themselves. And at this point, they were careful to keep a respectful distance from the table so as not to distract players. It was just a bit after 1 p.m. when both of the players suddenly rose to shake hands. After more than 4 hours of play, Phill Ivey had recovered his original loss and won an additional $10 million. And the corporation had recovered its $10 million loss since the 1st of February and earned another $6.5 million in revenue through Phill Ivey's efforts. Andy Beale has complimented members of the corporation for their sportsmanship and announced Beale would be heading home to Texas. He then also mentioned that he was done with poker. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed today's video and found it interesting, then make sure to leave us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon to be always updated with the most exciting content as soon as it's uploaded. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon in another video.